Today we're working on a Nissan Altima and we're going to show you how to replace a passenger side drive axle. This is a CVT transmission and a 2.5 4-cylinder, but it's going to be the same if you have a 6-cylinder engine as well. We have the vehicle jacked up and we have it supported by a jack stand, so everything's safe and ready to go. We're going to start with using a 21mm socket to remove these lug nuts. And if you don't have an impact gun, you're going to want to break these loose on the ground. So with your wheel removed, the first thing you're going to do is remove this brake line clip. So what I do is I just put a screwdriver, a long screwdriver or pry bar, and I rest it against the upper knuckle, and I just give it a tap back. And then I get in there with my flathead again and twist it off. Then what you'll be able to do is move this brake hose out of the way. So now that this is free, we'll be able to remove these two bolts here which secure the knuckle to the strut assembly. So we have two 21mm sockets. You could use a wrench if you want, but we have our breaker bar, our 21s, and I'm going to use my impact gun to just back this guy right out. We're going to do the same for the lower. But I'm going to switch sides. So we got a little ahead of ourselves here. You want to remove this axle nut before you really start doing anything else. And if you don't have an impact wrench or an impact gun, what you're going to have to do is put the vehicle on the ground with the wheel removed. The wheel will be on the ground, but you'll have the hubcap removed so that this is exposed. You'll remove this cotter pin, and then with the vehicle in park with the emergency brake on, you'll break this nut loose. But since we have all the impact tools, that's how we're going to go ahead and remove it. And this is a 32mm socket. Go ahead and back this guy out. Then I just put my nut back on and I give it some taps with a hammer to knock it loose from the spindle. And the reason we do that is if you look right here, you'll be able to see that there's a big form of rust buildup because this is just metal on metal. So now we'll go ahead and remove this bolt. And you'll want to support this when you remove this, and you don't want this cable to get tight. So just be mindful of your brake hose because you don't want that to get tight, and you also don't want to have this right here get tight. This is your wheel speed sensor. So we'll go ahead and remove that. And all you have to do is pull that out, and pull this out, and then it gives you plenty of slack to be able to do what you need to. So we're going to go ahead and hammer this again and get this guy out. Since we're replacing this, we're going to hit it with a heavy mallet. So a couple of whacks with a heavy mallet is what broke that rust seal loose. And now we'll be able to pull this back and remove our axle. So now remember, you want to make sure that this is not tight and that this is not tight. So we have a bungee cord just to add some additional support, but the lower ball joint seems to be holding everything in good order. So the next thing we're gonna do is remove this panel, which is just held on with these plastic clips. So once we remove this panel, we'll show you the next step, which is to remove two 16mm bolts that are holding on the rest of the axle assembly. Since these guys are delicate, and we already broke one a little bit, we're just gonna do them the slow way, which is with two tools and just prying them up carefully. And pull it out. So now we'll be able to move this out of the way. And we'll just tuck it down. Okay, so now you look in here, there's two bolts. There's a 16mm on top, and there's a 16mm kind of to the side at about the 7 o'clock position. So we're gonna reach in there and break those loose. Hey, I lied to you guys. It's held in by two 13mm bolts. Don't know why I kept saying 16, but it was on my mind. So once you've done that, you're gonna straighten the axle out and make it as straight as possible, and you're just gonna pull the whole assembly out. You're gonna have to give it a couple of good tugs before it comes out. You can also kind of use this as a slide hammer mechanism. You'll get the assembly out of the way and give it a good couple of tugs, and eventually it'll come with it. Okay, so we weren't able to just hammer this out from the back. So what we did is we removed the actual bracket that holds on this axle. And then what you'll do is you'll just reach your hand in there and you'll give it a couple of good tugs, and it will release for you, I promise. And then be careful as you pull the axle out, because you don't want to damage the axle seal. And you'll want to have a drain pan underneath because it's going to leak trans fluid. We're gonna go ahead and have to top that off. Now we're gonna go ahead and remove this so that we can reinstall it. Okay, so we finally have the carrier removed. What we had to do was take it off the vehicle. It's held in by four 16mm bolts. Hopefully you don't have to take this out, but what we tried to do was hammer it from the back with a chisel as well as a long breaker bar, and we weren't able to get the axle to pop out. What we had to do is remove it, and then we were able to put PB blaster around it, hammer this right here, which causes a shock wave to kind of break apart any sort of grime or rust that's built up, which you can see in here. And then we put PB blaster down both sides, gave it a bunch of wax, and it finally gave. And now we're gonna go ahead and show you how to reinstall everything. If you're taking a look at this, you'll see that the bearing cannot go this way, it has to come out that way. So as you're replacing the axle, just think about it. It's sitting on the car just like this. The front of the car is this way, the rear of the car is this way, the tire on the passenger side is this way, and the engine is this way. And what you'll do is you'll want it to come out this way. You'll see that there's a lip here, and you can't hammer it the other way. The bearing and the carrier just will not allow it. So I'm just going ahead and getting this into position, and you'll see on the back it's got a little dowel pin. Let me pull it out real quick. So when you're orienting it, there's a small little dowel in the back. You see those two dowels up top, and those correlate in with the block. So this only goes in one very specific location, and it's difficult to mess this up. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and install. This is the side that goes into the differential for the front transmission, and this is that little carrier bearing that we showed you earlier. So we're gonna go ahead and slide this in. And when you slide this in, you want it to be perfectly straight, and you want to make sure that you do not damage the axle seal, which is very easy to break. So we're going to go ahead and slip it in. Okay. We're in. So you're probably wondering what keeps this axle from sliding back out, because most of them have a C-clip at the end of it, which I'm pretty sure the driver's side does. So what this does is, this is your little carrier keeper. And how this works is this carrier goes outside of the axle and attaches it to that aluminum bracket that we removed earlier in the video. And then you have your 13mm bolts that hold it in. So that's what keeps the axle from coming out of the transmission. So now we're going to go ahead and start putting the axle back through the hub and spindle assembly. So we'll start by removing the bolt on the end. And this little plastic protector. And we'll lube the end of this with some grease so it slips back in the spindle. I'm just gonna smear it on ever so lightly, all the way around, then put it in place. You're gonna have to wiggle it a little bit to get it to come through, but eventually it will succumb to your force. And then the next thing you'll do is put the nut just a little bit on. You don't have to put it on tight, you're just gonna put it on there a little bit. And then you're going to get the knuckle back into the steering rack, lift it up in the position, and put that 21mm nut and bolt back through. And this one will require some lining up and some muscle. Do the same thing for the lower, and then grab your nuts and put them on. Then you go ahead and tighten these guys back up. Then you'll go ahead and torque them down. And to torque them down, you're going to need to either have 2 wrenches or one 21mm wrench, and then a socket with a breaker bar. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that they're nice and tight. So we're going to double check this with a torque wrench. And now we're just going to go ahead and put these guys back on. And we'll get our little clip, and we'll put the clip on. When the clip goes on, you'll see it's bowed on one side, and the bow side is facing up. Once you get it started, you'll just tap it the rest of the way on. And there you go. So now we're going to go ahead and reuse our old bolt. We were going to use a new one, but the new axle didn't come with a washer. And you can see here that the flange is just a little bit bigger than the bolt, and you need that washer because that washer needs to sit here on this face of the rotor to hold the axle in correctly. So we're going to go ahead and reuse our old nut here because it's in great shape. The next thing we're going to do is put a cotter pin in so that this thing never comes out. And then bend it so that it never comes out. And now we won't ever have to worry about our axle popping out. Thank you for watching our repair video. I want to take a moment to highlight a really wonderful local small business, Meat Crafters. They make a bunch of really great products in the meat world, but our personal favorite is the skinny salami. We'll be able to post a link in this video for you to check out more about them, but I want to express to you how important it is to shop local. Every single time that you support a local business, that money stays inside our community, and that is something that is incredibly important to the RevitAuto team.